For those of you who don't know, President Claudia Sheinbaum in Mexico has widespread public support. In fact, her public support is so secure that she has majority approval amongst the Mexican public, even among those who identify with opposition parties. So, by party affiliation, the Morena party, which is her party, supports her to the tune of 96%. Independent supports Claudia Sheinbaum 65%. PAN, the PAN party, right-wing party, who is actually funding these protests, which we're going to talk about in a moment. They were caught financing these regime change-esque protests, these CIA color revolution, Gen Z protests, as they call them. 57% of the party members of PAN support Claudia Sheinbaum. MC, 56%, PRI, 60%. The majority of every single opposition party supports Claudia Sheinbaum. There are not too many countries in the world where you can say something like that about a leader. Claudia Sheinbaum is objectively one of the most powerful, important, and well-liked leaders out of any country in the world right now. Amongst different education levels, you have total support, 85%, those who graduated only elementary school. Those who graduated middle school only, 81%. Those who had nothing but a high school degree in education, 81%. Those who graduated from university, 69% support. It's pretty incredible what's happening right now, and it's incredible because Claudia Sheinbaum is a person who is carrying on the legacy, and actually, I would argue, improving upon the legacy of President AMLO, who took the Morena party to its victory inside of Mexico for the first time. He ran for president 3 times. He lost the first 2 elections. Lots of accusations of voter fraud, preventing him from winning the first 2 elections. But he eventually got there. He won the elections, and he had widespread public support. He was succeeded by Claudia Sheinbaum. She is now doing an incredible job. And the reason why this is so important is because Claudia Sheinbaum, AMLO, the Morena party, they are about as anti-imperialist, they are about as multipolar of a party and leadership that you could ever hope for a country that has such an extensive border with the United States. So this is a very big deal, and that's why I think now people are starting to get worried, because they see that regardless of whatever they throw at AMLO, whatever they throw at Claudia Sheinbaum, it is not sticking, and these leaders are extremely popular. Now we'll discuss exactly what they're actually doing in Mexico. For example, Claudia Sheinbaum has reduced homicides by an impressive 37% in just 1 year across the country. Geopolitically, they stand with the anti-imperialist bloc. Mexican President Sheinbaum voices her opposition to the U.S. blockade on Cuba. That's something Zoran Mamdani won't even do. Zoran Mamdani said that Cuba is a dictatorship and Venezuela is a dictatorship. Sheinbaum says that she voices her opposition to the U.S. sanctions on Venezuela and the warmongering on Venezuela. She's a real one, not going to lie. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum labeled the crisis in Gaza as a genocide. Mexico also recognized an ambassador to Palestine. Mexico records historic drop in poverty. This is August of 2025. Social reforms and increases in the minimum wage implemented by the left-wing government in recent years have lifted millions of Mexicans out of extreme poverty. Mexico has outpaced the IMF's 2025 growth estimate for the second time this year. Sheinbaum said, "We are optimistic. It's not like before when it was all left to the market forces, which were controlled by the United States." Also, Mexican President Sheinbaum, like former President AMLO, accused the U.S. of arming drug cartels and gangs in Mexico. That really upsets the press when you say that inconvenient fact, okay? Now, a little bit more history here as to just how powerful, just how impactful, just how revolutionary this socialist leadership is. And yes, I mean, I maybe they don't call themselves a socialist every day. They're not out here praising Mao Zedong every single day. But if you want to know about what they think about socialism, you can listen to what Sheinbaum and what AMLO had to say about socialist revolutionary leaders. For example, former President AMLO said that he maintained. He grew up admiring Salvador Allende, Simon Bolivar, Che Guevara, Fidel Castro, Benito Juarez, Jose Marti, and other Latin American liberators. Not all socialists, yes, but I mean celebrated in the socialist tradition. If you look at Gustavo Petro, if you look at Maduro, if you look at Hugo Chavez, these are considered revolutionary, historically progressive, bourgeois revolutionaries that continued the historically progressive tradition that is now being carried out by socialist leaders all across Latin America. Okay, so let's take a look at AMLO's, some of his greatest accomplishments from 2018 to 2024. Minimum wage in Mexico increased by 280%. 280% over the span of 6 years. You understand how revolutionary that is? Mexico is now the single largest contributor to poverty alleviation in all of Latin America. And Latin America is at its, we have a new report out today, Latin America is at its lowest point of poverty across all of Central and Southern America at any point in history. I believe it's 24% of Central and Southern America are facing poverty. Right now, Mexico has contributed to 60% of the recent poverty alleviation that we are seeing across the region. The average annual GDP growth under AMLO reached approximately 3%. Poverty rate fell to a record low. Extreme poverty dropped sharply. Over 9 million Mexicans were lifted out of poverty over the 6 years that AMLO was in charge. Unemployment reached historic lows, around 2.5%. 12 additional vacation and rest days were added to the labor calendar. Workers' pensions and benefits were increased significantly. For the first time in 50 years, the Mexican peso became the best performing major currency against the US dollar. AMLO contributed greatly to homicide declines throughout the last 2 years of his presidency. U.S. tourism to Mexico reached all-time highs. Record numbers of Americans even relocated to Mexico at this point in time. And Mexico achieved energy self-sufficiency in gasoline and diesel through nationalizing, that's a scary word to U.S. multinationals, nationalizing Pemex refineries. Gasoline prices remained among the lowest in all of the Americas. That's why you had, and AMLO would joke about this, you had Americans who would literally cross the border to get fuel for their vehicles and then go back into America because gasoline was so cheap. Under AMLO, they Mexico nationalized 13 privately owned power plants. So this is how they were able to provide such cheap and affordable energy to their people, contribute to poverty alleviation, and begin the process of industrialization in the country. They declared lithium a strategic mineral and nationalized all lithium reserves in Mexico. You don't hear about this because this is legitimately terrifying to the U.S., that a country on their border is nationalizing all of the lithium reserves. And for the past 8 decades, Mexico has been firmly in the hands of U.S. multinational corporations and a slew of Western oligarchs who have funded various opposition parties inside of Mexico. Keep in mind, the Morena party, which has had widespread public approval through the 6 years of AMLO's presidency and now under Sheinbaum, the party is only about 12 years old, 14 years old, if I'm not mistaken. It is a new party. So for a century in Mexico, you had all of these Western-backed parties that represented different financial interests in America, different parties in America, who had total control over Mexico. Now, within the past decade, little over a decade, you had a new party come forward, say they're going to nationalize a bunch of stuff, and say they're going to stand with the anti-imperialist world and lift people out of poverty and call out the U.S. warmongering and imperialist antics like funding and arming the drug cartels in their country, and they have widespread public support. Not only that, Mexico repurchased and nationalized the hydrogen plant, major hydrogen plant in Tula, Mexico. They nationalized the world's largest salt mine. They repurchased and relaunched the passenger railway system all across Mexico. They relaunched the state-owned airline Mexicana de Aviación, and they acquired a major internet provider to expand rural connectivity for people living not in urban centers to have access to the internet. Sheinbaum invited President Putin to her October 2024 inauguration as president. In 2018, by the way, AMLO won with a 31-point margin. And in 2024, Sheinbaum won with a 33-point margin. And AMLO maintained a 60 to 80% approval rating throughout his entire 6-year term. Okay. AMLO discussed the fact on many occasions that the decline of family values in Mexico and across the world is a direct consequence of neoliberal capitalism. AMLO identified as a Christian. That was his faith. And this informed his commitment to the poor and to social justice. He interestingly had a very good relationship with Trump. He considered Trump a friend. He said that the deep state interests attempted to remove Trump from power and also were behind his assassination attempts. He maintained a pretty pragmatic relationship with Trump, despite the fact that he was a socialist, despite the fact that he talked about Fidel, despite the fact that he talked about Hugo Chavez, despite the fact that he talked about Che Guevara. And he described the Mexican people as a highly politically conscious and nearly impossible to manipulate the people there long term. And that's what we're seeing now. And that's why you see these weird little protests that are taking place across the country. I wanted to give you that insight into what's going on in Mexico because it is not talked about often enough. Usually on these sorts of YouTube channels, and talk shows, commentators online, you hear people talk about places where there are wars taking place. And yes, that is important. We need to secure peace. We need to secure sovereignty. But sovereignty comes in many shapes and forms. Sovereignty can be achieved through political means as well, and that's what Mexico's doing. And that's why you now see these deep state orchestrated protests and coup attempts across Mexico. What is going on in Mexico City? Put simply, the anti-Morena opposition, backed by the United States, by the way, astroturfed a Gen Z movement, not only for their big protest to be old people, paid hooligans, famous figures of the Mexican right, and some a rather paltry effort from the regime changers. So this is the man who is one of the two major figures behind the Gen Z protests. The Generation Z protests, supposed to be like 20-something-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 18-year-olds getting out and protesting. This is one of the main key figures. Former, I believe, former presidential candidate or president here. This guy's like super right-wing, very close with the United States. He's got on the Gen Z insignia, which has been utilized by U.S.-sponsored color revolutions all across the globe over the past few years. In Nepal, for example, I believe also in Bangladesh. This is what the Gen Z protesters are saying, by the way. Pretty incredible. Take a listen to this.
Al gobierno de Estados Unidos, listen, Trump, listen, see, come and help us, and please come and get the shit out of Mexico. Come and get Obrador, come and get Claudia fucking Sheinbaum.
Gracias, muchas gracias, gracias. Bueno.
That's your Gen Z protests for you. They're saying to come and invade Mexico. A bunch of old like Gen Xers and boomers are saying, please come invade Mexico and arrest our president and arrest our former president who enjoy widespread public support. Yeah, totally normal, totally not foreign funded. And here's where we get to the breakdown. Who is behind the failed Gen Z anime color revolution? Vast network of NGOs in the service of U.S. imperialism previously linked to USAID and NED. Mexican billionaire Ricardo Salinas, who was recently forced to pay billions in taxes and now holds a grudge against the government. He also owns a large media empire. I discuss Ricardo Salinas in my conversation on legitimate targets with Dennis Rogatuk, who is in Mexico and covers all this stuff that's ongoing and has for years. Mexican government basically told this corrupt billionaire who's like basically like the Ellison of, the Larry Ellison of Mexico. He's buying up all the media. He's like the George Soros of Mexico. They're like, hey, you have a lot of taxes you haven't paid. You need to pay those. We're going to force you to pay those, or else we're going to put you in prison. So he's pissed off about that. And Mexico's right-wing opposition leaders, close to the U.S., are behind this as well. You have the media, which is, using all the same insignia, all the same talking points. It gets very tired at this point. Thanks to the new location feature from Twitter, we now actually have been able to identify that most of the accounts that are boosting the Gen Z protests in Mexico are actually of foreign origin. Shocking. Okay. Argentinians, Spaniards, who would have guessed? So, this is more about what they've achieved over the past few years. Okay, that's talking. So this is one of the young men who is proclaimed as the nonpartisan leaders of the Gen Z protests. Turns out he was hired by the PAN party, tied to the U.S. far-right-wing party, and he was actually being paid a hefty sum to organize these protests. He was being paid $114,000 US over the course of 12 payments to organize these protests and lead this revolution, this totally normal revolution. So there you go. Nothing new under the sun. Mexico starts to get super base, and they try to do the CIA color revolution using their proxies, political parties that they control in the country. Turns out, though, not as easy as they thought it would be. You can't fool the people of Mexico. They overwhelmingly support Claudia Sheinbaum. They overwhelmingly support the Morena. They overwhelmingly support AMLO, and Mexico's only going to get more based as a result of this. I guarantee it. You try to do something like this, you don't earn a friend in the president of Mexico. You don't earn a friend in the Morena party. You further ostracize your, stated opposition, your alleged opposition, and it is only going to make the country more base. So hats off to Sheinbaum, hats off to the people of Mexico. I stand with you, and I love to see what's going on now. Before you leave, I want to say thank you for the support, because after 2 years of being banned, we are finally back home on YouTube. So be sure to subscribe to our channel and also join as a member on our channel using the link at the top of the description. I rely on the generous support of viewers like yourself to get the truth out to as many people as possible. You can also support the show on Locals or Give Sin Go. The mainstream media and the powers that be are never going to stop attacking us for bringing the truth to as many people as we do. Thank you so much for your support.